There we go.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, we're getting started a little bit late. Some technical difficulties as usual with these virtual meetings. You think we'd have a hang of it by now, but that's all right. So we've got a bit of a small group tonight, which is great. Like we host these information sessions kind of once every quarter, and it's an opportunity for folks who are interested in hearing more about the trust to come and ask questions in a more intimate setting. It's a little bit different than a one-on-one talk with any of our staff, but a great opportunity to learn more about the trust. So first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Mary Jane Roger. I'm the Executive Director here at the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust. I'm joined today with two of my colleagues, Mari Lamarck, our Land Trust Manager, who will be doing the bulk of the presenting this evening, as well as Ellen, who is our Outreach and Comms Coordinator, who can help with any technical challenges and will field some answers in the chat to questions and answers in the chat. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Trust, thank you for coming. We're really looking forward to sharing our mission with you this evening. I think there's some exciting announcements to make too, to share with you folks. Like we did just actually sign our first easement agreement this September. So that's a huge milestone for our organization. We've been working on this initiative since 2019. So this has kind of been our first, since then, this has been really our first full year of operations with dedicated staff. And we've been really, really happy with the progress we've made. So Mari, if you could just pull up the slides, we'll go ahead and get started. I think for housekeeping purposes, if folks could stay muted, and then if you have questions, probably just wait till the end of Mari's presentation, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A period.
All right, can everybody see?
Yes, thanks, Mari.
Yeah, no worries.
So welcome everyone. We first just want to proceed with a land acknowledgement, and I recognize that you might be tuning in from elsewhere in the province, but our team today is meeting in Guestbowick, which is one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey people first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but it in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and established rules that were meant to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We'll also just note today that the term private lands and conservation are complicated topics in and of themselves. Canada as a nation was built on lands that were already occupied by Indigenous people who were living on their own lands under their own laws and with their own societies at the time of discovery and colonization by Europeans. So we acknowledge the Mi'kmaq as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land and thank them for sharing their homeland with us, and we are all treaty people. So I'll just mention a couple things as well. Here on this slide is this concept of private land ownership. You'll hear us say often land stewards rather than land owners, and that's really to help encompass this idea that private property is a constructed right through a colonial system, and that landowners are really stewards of their land and meant to preserve the conservation values and multiple values of that land in perpetuity throughout stewardship. So we're really here today to evaluate our role within conservation and forestry and build relationships, alleviate barriers, and continue to have hard conversations. So I will pass it off to Mari now. I'll kind of be in the background for the first hour of this meeting. So if you have any specific questions that you want to ask me exactly, I'll be around, and then I do have to leave before the Q&A, unfortunately, for another meeting. But thanks everyone for coming again, and take it away, Mari.
Thank you, MJ. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I know December is a pretty busy time for everyone, so I'm really grateful for your attention and curiosity about the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust. So my name is Mari. I am the Land Trust Manager. I've been here about a year, just over a year now, and pleased to offer this wee presentation about what we're doing here at the Trust, offer some updates and to share how folks can get involved. So the presentation is about 45 minutes, which leaves us lots of time for question and answers at the end. If you have a question in the middle of the presentation, feel free to just drop it in the chat. Ellen can help us keep that recorded where we can answer it in the Q&A session. Yeah, I'll just dive right in, but really happy to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for joining. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the trust, I like to ask a few questions about, or like kind of a rhetorical, or like questions to kind of get your mind thinking a little bit about what we're doing and why you're here today. So I have a few prompts here to help you along, and maybe they'll speak to you, or maybe you have someone else in your life that they might speak to. But I'm just hoping here to kind of prime the lines with some of the themes that I'll be discussing today and how the trust can help you face some of these challenges. So, what does stewardship mean to you? And how do you like to spend time in your forest or in the forest on the land? Are you concerned what will happen to your land after your time? Kind of along the same lines, do you have a succession plan for your property? Are you concerned about nearby land use changes? So maybe some unsustainable forestry in your area, maybe some clear cutting or liquidation logging, or is development creeping towards you? And so when you're thinking about that, one of our kind of taglines at the trust is the question kind of back to landowners and land stewards of who will continue your stewardship legacy. So these are some of the themes that we'll be talking a little bit about tonight. So stepping back for a second, just the kind of broader mission and vision of the trust. So the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust envisions a healthy, resilient, forested landscape across Nova Scotia through a network of land stewards who have a shared commitment to long-term stewardship. And our mission is to uphold those stewardship legacies of land stewards across the province. So how do we do this? And the primary way is to actually partner with woodland stewards to uphold the ecological integrity of their woodlands and preserve their stewardship of care, their legacy of care and stewardship in perpetuity. So the primary way that we do this right now is by placing working forest community easements on woodlots. Our easements are not one size fits all, meaning that they can be customized to each land steward's goals. So this is by way of a forest management or forest stewardship plan. We can capture, the land steward's kind of objectives and management goals or conservation goals in perpetuity. So our easements exist in perpetuity. They are forever tied to the deed of the property. So our easements follow the land, not the land owner or land steward. So that being said, land stewards can or do maintain ownership of the property and, can transfer it to kin or sell it as they would normally, but that easement kind of stays in place on the deed of the property after it's on. And while the trust offers a lot of services, forest forestry expertise and management services during our onboarding process. Our real long-term commitment to a land steward is that long-term monitoring of the property. So it's a long-term, forever commitment to ensure that our easements are upheld in perpetuity. So this looks like annual visits to a property to ensure that the terms of the easement are upheld. We'll get into a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of our easements in a little bit. So just Mary Jane mentioned a little bit about our beginnings, but I just wanted to acknowledge that the trust was established in 2019 as our own not-for-profit entity, but our beginnings really started as a project that was incubated through the Medway Community Forest Cooperative. The MCFC is, if you don't know, is a Crown land licensee in Annapolis County that is a leader in ecological forestry and pilots alternative to Crown land management. And in their interactions with the public and private landowners, they learned very quickly that there was a need to serve private woodlot stewards in ensuring that their lands remain in high quality forests. So that is kind of where the idea of the trust came from. And as I said, was established in 2019. And it wasn't until the end of last year, in 2023, that we were granted eligible body status under the Community Easements Act. So that was, that is a status that kind of grants us ability to hold easements and be the holder of easements. So that was a very, very big step for us. And it was kind of, a secondary launch of the organization, essentially, which allowed us to access more funding, but also actually market ourselves as easement holders. And yeah, we've been building a lot of momentum and have made a lot of progress in the past year. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but this is just a snapshot of our team. You've met Mary Jane, who is our executive director. I'm the land trust manager, and Ellen, who is our outreach and communications coordinator. We also have a fabulous field team of Shayla and Cam, and we're growing that team next year to have more boots on the ground to conduct our onboarding fieldwork and stewardship fieldwork. And you'll see in the executive and directors list here, we have a fabulous team of forest professionals, conservation professionals, and land stewards who, provide great direction and great support at the board level for us. I'm just going to take a sip of water. So, why build a working woodlands trust? Why is this important? So, we know that the majority of land stewards in Nova Scotia are mostly in retirement, and many of them do not have a clear succession plan for who will manage their woodlands after their time. So woodland stewards age, and there's going to be a large intergenerational transfer of land assets to their kin, or lands will be sold. So a number of scenarios that are occurring after this transfer result in poor forestry practices or liquidation logging. So the first is, the new owners, the successors, or the kin are disconnected from their land, from the forest, and they sell their land to the highest bidder, which could be a developer or a logger who liquidates the land. We also have the infamous capital gains tax. So current owners might be forced to cut a large portion of their woodlands to pay for that capital gains tax that is triggered when land is sold. Also, the woods can also be seen as a little bit of a bank account. And so people who are in an economic pinch might liquidate a portion or their whole woodlot to help pay for retirement, large purchases, their grandkids or kids' college, these sort of large purchases. So the Working Woodlands Trust is trying to kind of stop this cycle of transfer and liquidation logging by protecting them with working forest easements. And we believe that our easements can protect forest health and uphold stewardship legacies while supporting a diversity of revenue generating opportunities. So in addition to risks of lands changing hands, common threats to forest include other kinds of land conversion. So we talked a little bit about the liquidation logging and clear cutting, which Leahy reports nearly 90% of harvesting on private land is clear cutting. We also have conversion to agriculture. The example of blueberry farming is quite common in Nova Scotia. And then another big one is subdivision and property development. So this could occur, it's really common around small lakeside properties, which are, usually beautiful forested areas that get chopped up into cottage lots and second homes. But we also have urban sprawl and the development into the forested areas adjacent to our urban areas. So the vision of the Working Woodlands Trust is a way to benefit the community and the environment and address some of these problems that we just listed. So we see the trust as a way to maintain forest cover and grow quality forest products, which can help sustain income over time instead of liquidation logging. We see it as a way to grow community land assets and the long-term economic potential of our rural lands. The trust also, is an amazing way, our easements are an amazing way to support landscape connectivity. So this is, the connection of important habitats by ways of corridors and such, and that allow for healthy watersheds and wildlife movement. And then finally, this is one of our unique offerings at the Working Woodlands Trust is the promotion and encouragement of practicing ecological forestry. And this can be through improved forest management and climate adaptive silviculture. So briefly, just describing what I mean when I say ecological forestry, it is any merchantable and non-merchantable forestry activities or silviculture that consider climate adaptivity and mimic natural disturbances while maintaining biodiversity features and ecological function. Excuse me. So what is a working forest community easement? Our easements are filed under the Community Easements Act. And as I said before, it is a legal agreement that binds an eligible body, which is the Working Woodlands Trust, and a landowner or land steward through this Community Easement Act. So this legal agreement outlines the restrictions and allowances, what we call agreed practices regarding land use, including property development and buildings, natural resource extraction, such as forestry, and road building. And these are some of them, but there's many other listed agreed practices. As I said before, our easements are tied to the deed of the property and exist in perpetuity, so they follow the land, not the landowner. Yes, that's what I have to say about that. My next slide here is bringing to your attention that our easements are not the same as a traditional conservation easement. So the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust was created essentially to actually complement existing conservation-focused land trusts, filling the gap for the conservation of working forests. So the key difference is what we allow, what our allowable and agreed practices are to support working forests. So what this looks like, in addition to using different legislation, actually, so the Conservation Easements Act, is a different one than our Community Easements Act. So in addition to the different legislation, conservation easements prioritize preserving natural resources with minimal or no human intervention, where our working forest easements integrate sustainable and ecological management practices to balance conservation with human use. Conservation easements restrict all commercial activity. No management is permitted on conservation easement properties, whereas our working forest easements permit and encourage ecological forestry practices. And these practices for us will always need to be tied to a forest management or forest stewardship plan. For our conservation easement side here, residential and agricultural areas, if they will be continued to be used as such, need to be subdivided out, which increases the cost to the landowner. And in our easements, residential and agriculture areas can remain within the easement property and go through a zoning process. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. So during an onboarding of a land steward, we'll have our wonderful field team will go out with the property owner and kind of walk around and learn about how properties are being used, and go through this process of zoning with the land steward to really delineate like what happens where and how can we lay out and map this easement in a way that's supportive of the land steward's current uses and future uses as well. So we recognize that many woodlands are multifunctional and may have areas that land stewards don't really want to place our restrictions on. So we have this zoning process that allows land stewards to kind of decide where these agreed practices can apply, essentially. So we have 3 zones, and not all properties that have an easement have all 3 of these zones. It is very much a collaboration with the land steward to really delineate what zone goes where. So first and foremost, we have the working forest zone. This is, the primary goal of the organization is to promote ecological forestry. So this is something that will likely be on every single one of our easements, but the other 2 might not be. And this is where ecological forestry is allowed. This is what the management plan really, or the stewardship plan really dives into, what practices and what kind of treatments are suggested in certain areas. This area allows road and trail construction as well as new builds, so long as that they're under 200 square feet. Next, we have the residential and agricultural zone. We've kind of lumped these together because they're kind of high traffic, high human use. And this is an area where our agreed practices pretty much don't apply. We will not be monitoring these areas for tree harvest, or any other kind of monitoring activities. So this is where obviously agriculture is allowed. This is where Christmas tree farming would kind of fit in, even though it's a little bit working forest, a little bit agriculture. We've decided to put it in agriculture. Any kind of new builds can happen in this area. So when we're talking with land stewards about zoning for the future, essentially any area that people might want to build another building over that 200 square feet, a cabin, a barn, whatever, we'll ask to zone that residential agriculture, just so we can not cause any infractions on the easement. Finally, we have a conservation zone, which is more of your traditional conservation easement type restrictions. So no forestry, resource extraction, or development is allowed. And we kind of consider these areas forever wild. So they, yeah, there's no management that happens in these areas once they're zoned conservation. And the unique opportunity with these conservation zones is that they actually can contribute to our conservation, our provincial and federal conservation targets, which is a really unique offering for land stewards, especially people who have private land. Um, often the contribution to protected area targets are public lands. So, it's if a land steward has a special area that has a species at risk or a wetland, maybe it's old forest, these kind of things, we may suggest putting a conservation zone around it. It's not necessary. If the land steward doesn't want that, that's totally up to them. But in the event that they would, it can contribute to our provincial and national targets, which is pretty exciting. So you've heard me say quite a bit about our agreed practices. These are our key tenets of the easement agreement. So it's what can and cannot be done in that working forest zone. And within our agreed practices, we have 3 kind of categories of activities. These lists are not exhaustive, but representative. If you are interested in a copy of the kind of appendix for easement or the easement agreement at all, we'd be happy to share the exhaustive list with you. But for the permitted activities, so these are things that we are not monitoring for. Any hiking, trail clearing, non-commercial foraging, any use of motorized vehicles on existing and designated roads. The restricted activities is kind of our middle ground category. So these activities, while permitted, do require a 60-day notification period prior to commencing. Excuse me. And this is just to kind of flag and notify the trust of what you're doing. And it's an opportunity for us to visit and check in to see if these practices are in line with your approved management or stewardship plan. So this is these are activities such as any kind of forest harvesting, new road construction, or maybe some restoration projects such as planting. And then the prohibited activities are the kind of never allowed, immediate infraction sort of activities. And these are, the driving force behind what our easements are trying to protect against. So this is any kind of property subdivision, new residence construction, and unsustainable harvesting or clear cutting of the woods. So just moving on a little bit to kind of like, how do we pay for all this and the kind of financial component of easements. So, we're committing to monitoring your property long term, forever, in perpetuity, and that comes at a cost, right? So each property requires an endowment fund, which will pay for the trust to uphold our end of the easement, which is annual site visits in perpetuity. And the cost of the endowment is largely dependent on the area of the woodland and also the risk of infraction. So it is covering the cost of those annual visits, but also a little bit goes towards negotiations or liability costs should they occur, such as negotiations and legal defense. So we are looking to the carbon market as a way to actually finance these endowments. Traditionally, Well, traditional land trusts will often ask land stewards to contribute a financial contribution in addition to placing an easement on their property to pay for that long-term monitoring. But we're looking to the carbon market in effort to finance those endowment costs. Also, the carbon market is largely inaccessible to smaller land stewards. Um, and often requires about a 8 to 10,000 acre minimum pool of a project to actually access the market. So what we are proposing is that our trust will facilitate an aggregated carbon project, so we can access the carbon market as a group. So we'll bring together the network of land stewards equating to that 8 to 10,000 acre pool. And just sidebar, the scale is required for project feasibility. It's just for developers to consider the project. You really do need to bring a substantial amount of carbon volume to the market. So our role in this will be to facilitate the aggregation as well as to liaise with the third-party carbon developer who will market and sell the credits. So we will have an agreement with the carbon developer, and each land steward will have a carbon agreement, which is actually integrated into the easement agreement with us. And we ask that, these agreements happen on a 40-year term, and the easement actually kind of needs to be signed before we launch the carbon project completely. So we will all sign the easements together and kind of officially launch the carbon project together. So what are the benefits to land stewards to get involved with the trust? First and foremost is we're offering that long-term stewardship and monitoring of a property. So once an easement is in place, it's likely that sometime down the line the land is going to change hands, and maybe it's going to be in your family for 1 or 2 cycles, but after that it's kind of unknown. And what we can ensure is that the trust will be there to ensure that your stewardship legacy and the woods are going to be taken care of long term. We also have this fabulous staff who are forest professionals. We also have lots of connections in the field of forestry and conservation to help land stewards make informed decisions about land management and stewardship of their land. Each easement is kind of catered to each individual land steward by way of a stewardship plan. So part of our onboarding process is to provide land stewards with pretty much a subsidized or free management plan to help guide the future decision making of the land on a 10-year term. We're also offering this opportunity for smaller land stewards to access the carbon market as a group in service and protection of their long-term conservation of their properties. And finally, it's the peace of mind that your woodlot is stewarded and cared for in perpetuity. So who is eligible for the trust? Currently, we're working with land stewards who have over 200 forested acres. This is coming from a need to build this carbon project to kind of get us launched and off the ground. It's more of an administrative requirement than anything else. Of those 200 acres, we really hope that 50% or more of it is mature forest, so over 60 years. We take on properties that are managed, ecologically managed, or in a natural state. So, you've heard me say forest management plan a lot. But if your goals are predominantly conservation, we're happy to work with you as well. So in order to be eligible for the carbon program, we do need to have that forest management plan. But if it's something that you don't have, we can help you achieve that. It does need to be FSC certified. That's a requirement from the carbon developers. It's also nice to have, if your property adds to a contiguous forested landscape, has minimal human structures or buildings, or the presence of special habitat features or wildlife. So I understand that the 200-acre piece is limiting and might be discouraging for some people, but I really hope that you don't discount us quite yet. Knowing you're interested in our organization is still really important, and we're keeping track of people who have less than that amount, and really trying to build in some opportunities for people who have smaller woodlots. So as you can see in this bubble here, we're actually developing a cluster woodlot policy. It's not fully fleshed out yet, but that will open up some opportunities for people who have over 100 acres of forested land. That's kind of nearby one of what we're calling like an anchor property that does meet that 200-acre requirement. I know it's a little confusing, but if you have less than 200 acres, please still get in touch. We really do want to hear from you, because we want to build programs that work for land stewards who have woodlots of all sizes. So during the onboarding process, we have quite a few field services that need to be conducted before an easement is actually put into place. So as I said before, we have this FSC management planning. This is a requirement for our carbon program. If it's something that you don't have, our field team is trained to do that. So that's something that we can offer. It's a great way to learn more about your forest type and forest in general, and talk about what you would like to do, and your kind of long-term vision of your woodlot. The other big piece that our field team offers is a baseline documentation report, and this is a really fabulous overview that gives you a snapshot of all of the different values of your property, kind of beyond forest stand quality volume sort of thing. And it will give you a snapshot of the biodiversity values, timber volume, forest cover and soil type. Also offer some really wonderful maps and check your boundary lines. And this is all to have a very accurate snapshot of the property before or at the time of signing the easement. And this ensures that our annual monitoring can kind of compare all these things and check in on all of these things, and really kind of offer, I guess also it's offered like a lot to land stewards just in learning about more details and information about your woodlot that you might not already know. And then once the easement is in place, field work will significantly reduce, and it kind of drops down to that annual monitoring visits from our field team. I guess I'll also add, it's not in here, but our field team would also likely come out to visit your woodlot if you had notified us of a harvest that's happening. We'd probably like to come and check that out, and just chin wag and get to know what you've been doing on your woodlot that year. So this is a little bit of a sidebar, but you might have heard on the radio or something that we also have another program in addition to our carbon program called the Hemlock Conservation Program. And it is an opportunity for land stewards with exceptional old growth hemlock and larger stands to access an easement as well as get some treatment for the invasive hemlock woolly adelgid. An easement is required for this program to be accessible. We're also just kind of working with land stewards in Lunenburg, Kings, and Annapolis counties right now. We are very close to being like 3/4 full of a maximum of 600 acres. That's how much funding we have right now. But we've had a lot of interest in this program. It's been really well received and really exciting to work with land stewards who have these beautiful hemlock stands. So if you know of someone who is within these counties with old growth hemlock, please do reach out to us. In addition to having a list of folks who have smaller woodlots, we're also creating kind of like a hemlock conservation program waiting list as well. So yeah, keep that in mind too. So this is just a pictorial representation of what our process looks like when someone is interested in the trust. So usually it'll start off with a one-on-one meeting. This happens usually over the internet like this, like over a Teams call or phone call with myself and maybe one other of our staff members. And we just kind of go over the ins and outs of our easements and our programs, and allows me to listen to what land stewards have to share about their hopes for their land, in the future. If we deem that it's appropriate to move forward together, we'll do a site visit with our field team and myself to get the lay of the land and do a walk. These are really enjoyable walks to, get the oral history of the land from the person who's been taking care of it for so long. This is also an opportunity for us to kind of share documents with land stewards who are hoping to take the next step with us. And then the next step will be to sign the letter of intent. So this is not a legally binding agreement between ourselves and the land steward, kind of just describing what the relationship will look like in between the signing of the letter of intent and the signing of the easement. Yes, but that is not a legally binding agreement. And it essentially mostly talks about access for our field team to come and do the field work necessary to build the easement together. So the field work is a small bubble here, but it is actually quite a bit of work. Some of our current land stewards or onboarding properties have, we've spent, over a week there conducting field work, big long days in the mosquitoes and whatnot. But this is where we're building the management plan if it's required. This is also where we're building our baseline documentation report, taking extensive inventory of the boundary lines. And we haven't started these yet, but we'll next year. We'll be doing carbon inventories for the properties onboarding onto our carbon program as well. So all of those documents need to be signed off by the land steward as well as the trust. So we all agree that this is, the foundational kind of tailored documents to the land that go along with the easement. Once those are signed off of, we'll sign the actual easement agreement. And as I said before, we're not signing the easements for the carbon program until we've fully built our pool, which we're hoping to finish for next year. So kind of by the end of 2025, early 2026, we're hoping to sign our carbon easements as a collective. It'll be a big, exciting time. And then after that, our role really does kind of decrease, and it goes into that long-term monitoring, which consists of our annual visits as well as any visits that are kind of triggered by the notification period for our restricted practices. So where are we now? This is just a wee snapshot. It's really fun to update this for every new info session because it's always growing. But currently we have over 1,250 acres onboarding onto our carbon program, and over 170 acres onboarding into our hemlock conservation program. We actually signed our first easement, which is 83 acres in Lunenburg County, through the hemlock conservation program in September. It's a really big deal for us, and we're super excited to have that kind of in place. So in another way to kind of describe all of that is that we have 8 land stewards who have signed that letter of intent, so are kind of like midway through that onboarding process, and who are most of the field work to support all those easements is done actually, but we have more set up for the winter. We also have negotiations kind of underway for 3 more land stewards in our hemlock conservation program, so another 300 acres, and 2 more for our carbon program, so another 400 acres. So that kind of, there's always ongoing field work to support these onboarding land stewards, continuing through the year, and we're also pushing pretty hard on outreach as well. So this is a wee map of where we are in the province. We are a provincial organization, but you can see most of our current properties being onboarded are in the west. You can see the green dots there are our carbon program, and then the blue dots are the hemlock program. Excuse me. Yeah, hoping to, populate this a bit more in the next year, and especially in the kind of central and eastern parts of the province. It'd be great to have some participants elsewhere in the province. So for those who are interested, this is kind of what we need. You can contact us at the info at Nova Scotia or the nsworkingwoodlandstrust.org website. And we just need your contact information as well as the property ID and address maybe. If you do have a management or stewardship plan, we'd love to see it and take a look. And then, in preparation for that initial meeting, you can just kind of think a little bit about an evaluation from us, and thinking about what kind of state your boundary lines are in and if they need maintenance. I would say the biggest part, or there are 2 biggest parts in the what can you prepare for piece, are thinking about that zoning process. So where do you want to have these residential zones or residential and agricultural zones in particular? Think about if you would like to have a conservation zone on your property and what that would mean for you. And then, the other big piece is to review we ask land stewards to review our agreements with your lawyer. That's just due diligence on your part. We have a lawyer that you're welcome to chat with, but he does represent us. But he's wonderful, and he'd be happy to talk with people if they're interested as well. But we do recommend you getting your own legal advice. So I just have a few more slides here, or this is my last slide. Sorry. We have a couple upcoming events just to think about if you'd like to participate a little bit more in what we're up to. We have a workshop that we're calling Community Conservation, Preserving Working Woodlands, at the Burlington Community Club in Kings County on the 25th of January. And this is kind of a official launch of that cluster policy that I was talking about earlier. So we have a land steward in that particular community who meets our eligibility requirements, and we wanted to talk with that community directly who might be eligible. But if you're in the area or would like to learn more, please come out. We'll have snacks and coffee and tea, and it'll be a lovely event. Next, we have two kind of workshops that don't have dates quite yet, but we're planning a financial and estate planning webinar. This is something that's come up a lot with people we've engaged with about how do we plan for capital gains tax? What are the tax incentives, or like tax rules around woodlots and easements and this kind of thing. So we're going to be launching that in collaboration with the Federation of Nova Scotia Woodlot Owners. That will probably be in February. And then we're also going to be doing a boundary line workshop in collaboration with North Nova Forestry, which is up in Colchester County. And yeah, we're going to be going over what makes a good boundary line, how to identify them if they're not well marked. So we'll be working with foresters, forest techs, as well as a surveyor to kind of answer questions and get some boots on the ground. This is also going to be in the area where Fiona hit too. So I think a lot of boundary line issues have come up since then. So I think it'll be a really great hands-on experience to learn more about that. I'll also prompt here that, a membership with the trust is absolutely free. You have voting rights at our AGM, and we really would love to have more input in shaping our organization. We're new and growing and want to best serve woodlot stewards in the province. So please join us, and you can do that on our website. So that concludes my presentation. I will stop sharing and just allow a moment for folks to think about if they have any questions. Go ahead, Samantha.
Thanks, Mari. That was a really informative presentation. I was kind of just jotting down some questions as you were going along. And I just wanted to clarify, and I'm sure you mentioned this, but so is a community easement synonymous with what you're calling a working forest easement?
Yes, yeah, totally. Great question. But yes, same.
Okay, perfect. And then in follow-up to that, in terms of the zoning, is there opportunity to rezone over time? So if you've allocated a certain percentage and like location in the property to be a conservation zone, could you make that bigger or change the location over time?
That's not something that we've deliberately discussed, but what we're kind of, I would say no. Like, we're trying to set the zoning as firm as possible at the time of filing. I would be interested in the answer to the question of expansion of the conservation zone. Like, the risk, right, is like we don't want to decrease it or change the conservation zone. But I'd be curious if, I don't know, Mary Jane, do you have any opinions on that? I saw you jumped on here.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, Mari. Like the opportunity maybe would be to expand the conservation zone. Like it's not, I don't know how easy it is to like amend easement once it's filed with the act. We definitely would not want to go changing, we would not want to change a conservation zone to a working forest. So that would not work. Primarily because of, we're dedicated to try and find opportunities for those conservation zones to count for Canada's protected area goals. So reversibility is not likely a thing that we want to entertain it in that respect. So I think like probably no, but good question.
Awesome. I only had one more, but I'm happy to put my hand down and I can jump in at the end if there's no other questions.
I mean, have at it. I think you can keep going.
Okay. The other question is if there's a landowner that has multiple properties that total the 200 acres, would that be something that the Working Woodlands Trust would look at including in their land base? Or is the preference that the one property or adjacent PIDs totals the 200 acres?
That's a good question. I should have that in my presentation. It is, yeah, we would consider 200 acres over multiple PIDs as eligible. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yes, there's like efficiency for monitoring for that requirement, but it's also the kind of negotiations and paperwork and like people part of that as well. So I think, the efficiency in having just the one landowner or land steward for that would be totally fine.
Great, thank you.
So much. Hey, Sherm. Oh, I think you're muted. Still can't hear you. Your icon keeps coming on and off, but I don't know if it's...
Maybe if we just get Sherm to type his question in the chat. I know sometimes the mics never work when you want them to with Teams. No, it's sometimes if you try Sherm under the ... in the more, you can play around with your sound settings.
How's that?
You got
There
it.
we go. Oh, no, we can't hear. So weird.
Any luck?
Here you are. Oh, now you left us.
Maybe we'll Sherm. Yeah, we can't hear you. Do you want to ask your question in the chat? It's too bad. Maybe if anyone else has a question in the meantime.
Hello? Oh, the mic's working?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, bit of a newbie question here. It's actually about the hemlocks. So, in my past field of forestry, they were generally referred to as an unmarketable tree or UMT. Now, mind you, that's big monoculture forestry. That's not something I'm looking to do with my woodlot. But I'm wondering, what is the significance of hemlocks kind of being eligible for separate easements? And just if anybody could just shed some light on that, I would appreciate it.
I can take that one, Mari, if you want. Yeah, so there is a market for hemlock in Nova Scotia. So it's used as a sawable product primarily. So like rough sawn hemlock is often used for like outbuildings and is milled by several mills here.
Okay.
The significance of hemlock really is like its old growth value, because you are
Yeah.
right, like it hasn't historically been the most valuable product. So that has then grown a lot of our older forests to be primarily hemlock. So now we have most of our old forests are hemlock, and now we have this invasive species, the hemlock woolly adelgid, that is really
Yes.
placing a significant risk on those forests. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because no, the reason I'm asking is the property, well, my property has about I'd say in the neighborhood of 30 hemlock trees that are all over the 80, 90 year mark, but I just, up until now, I never really understood that they had any value. Because like I said, as I know it, they are generally kind of on the unmarketable side of things. But no, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know there was anybody sawing them here.
Yeah, you'd have to, like, if you had 30 or 40 trees and you wanted to cut them all down, like that would, probably wouldn't be like our recommendation and
No,
like
no, no,
alignment
no,
with.
that's
Yeah.
no, that's because I was actually the reason I was more curious was from a conservation standpoint. Um,
Mhm.
because from what I understand, some of the oldest hemlocks in the country are in Nova Scotia, particularly along the Fundy Basin, as well as in New Brunswick. Some of them totaling around the 500-year mark. Um, so yeah, I was just wondering kind of what their significance was to this because I have them, but I wasn't really sure where they kind of fit into the forestry management rubric. The only other thing I wanted to ask was with respect to agricultural land management and changing I guess the rezoning. Would it count if could you expand the rezoning into a conservation area if you reforested it, like say if you planted an old farm field, like a hay field?
I I think that I mean, just to clarify, like our zoning is like kind of on the upfront before the easement is in place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you wanted to plant an old farm field, I would probably consider that more of like a working forest zone
Okay,
and
yeah.
not a conservation zone.
Okay.
So that can be, under like a restoration plan within the forest stewardship plan. And
Mhm.
then could, allow for more management to get it up to the state, um, like the forests that you're hoping for.
Okay, perfect. So basically, in essence, reforestation counts as acceptable under the easement.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
absolutely.
Perfect, perfect.
Thanks, MJ.
All right, no further questions from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, Robert.
Hi, thanks for the presentation and all the information regarding the Working Woodland Trust. Question regarding financial incentive for land stewards, and whether or not the program would protect that transfer if it were to akin from capital gains taxes.
Yes. So I mean, I'm not an expert. But and this is like something that I'm hoping that we can kind of loop someone in to better address this in our like financial and estate planning workshop that we're launching in February. But so the easement itself will not preclude someone from the capital gains tax. However, there is like the intergenerational land transfer provision, which is a provincial program, um, that a woodlot steward can enter into to help avoid. Are you aware of that program?
No, I'm actually in New Brunswick, but
Oh,
there
okay,
is
shoot.
so there's my understanding in New Brunswick is that is provided there's an established forest management
Yeah,
plan,
yeah, exactly.
it is exempt from those capital gains
Yeah,
taxes.
it's like, I mean, I don't think just by having a management plan you're exempt. Like I think you have to go through this program, which is like an additional kind of paperworky legal process. But the same sort of thing, yeah. But the easement itself will not do that.
Okay, and does the trust pay the land steward for the easement? Is there a financial thing, or is it just
Not not directly. So
okay?
what we're offering is management planning services, kind of including in it, and then the long-term stewardship and maintenance and insurance of the land being protected.
Okay.
And we are accessing the carbon market to pay for ourselves and
Mhm.
the management of our, or like the overhead of our organization. Should there be additional carbon revenue in excess of what we need to do that, that's what we're going to be paying back to the land stewards.
Okay, interesting.
So there's not a number value with that at the present time. So that's why it's not kind of included in my presentation, but it is something that we would love to be able to do. We're a not-for-profit organization. We're not going to be keeping stuff extra. And we want to share that with people who are committing to the long-term stewardship of their properties.
Nice. Okay. I think that actually including the forest management planning and some element of the boundary services, I think is the big financial gain we'll use.
I think it, like, for the right person, it's a good carrot. You know what I mean? But for those who are super financially motivated and see our kind of advertising or like marketing around carbon, they're like, how do I get that carbon dollar? And what we're trying to like kind of reframe is that we're using that carbon dollar to give you these services to ensure that your land is going to be forested and well stewarded in perpetuity.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Hey, Sherm, can you pull it back just a little bit? See Q&A. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I have the questions from Sharma up here.
Great.
The first one, what portion of the easement contributes to the carbon market pool? Only the conservation area or also the working woodland area?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is the whole easement property. So we will evaluate what carbon is on the whole PID and use those credits to contribute to the carbon pool. Yeah, great question.
Second question from Sherm. One of the roles of NSWWT is long-term stewardship. That is also assistance provided by Western Woodlot Services Cooperative. How do the organizations relate to each other? Good question.
Also a great question. So WWSC is a partner of ours. And yeah, we work together to ensure that, the requirements for our easements, like the management planning, et cetera, is conducted. They're partners with us. They also have a congruent vision for the upholding of ecological forestry in the province. So we honor their stewardship plans. If the woodlot owner has a relationship with the WWSC, we're not looking to duplicate it or step on any toes. And yeah, we would just encourage that relationship to continue. Great.
And last question from Sherm is, can you tell us more about your relationship with carbon market traders?
Yeah. So this has been kind of happening in the background, as you know, Sherm. We still don't have a full partnership agreement with a carbon marketer and developer, but we have been making really good progress with one in particular that we met actually in the States at a conference. They're called the Climate Trust, and they're a not-for-profit carbon developer. Until now, we've only been meeting with for-profit developers who, are very market-driven and for-profit. And this relationship with the Climate Trust is going really well. They seem to be very aligned with our vision for the carbon project and, the preservation of the stewardship legacies of Nova Scotia woodlot owners. They think it's a really good storytelling opportunity, and it's a very marketable credit for their buyers. So this is an ongoing conversation, but they have taken a look at, so we were able to share some shape files of the current properties that are already enrolled in the trust to kind of have them take a look about what kind of carbon is on there. Is this going to be a viable project, etc.? And it was very positive, and actually said that we can probably build a smaller project, like launch a smaller project and it be like economically worthwhile for all parties. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we can lower that, I mentioned like the 10,000 acre pool requirement. I think we're going to be able to lower that a little bit next year and actually achieve it next year. So it's feeling really promising. And yeah, as I said, we haven't like fully signed any agreements or anything, but they're really keen to work with us, and it's felt like the most like mutually agreeable relationship thus far. Thanks, Sherm. Happy to chat more about that in the future if you want to. Go ahead, Robert.
Another question regarding the hemlock program and hemlock woolly adelgid. What's the threshold for old growth, and does the size of the woodlot have to meet the same threshold as the other easement?
Yeah. So the answer to the second question, the size is different. The minimum acreage for that particular program is 50 acres. So we're entertaining quite a bit smaller properties. Like as you might have seen in the slide describing our first easement, it's 82. So smaller properties, and like we're just working within those 3 counties, which kind of like are at the leading edge of the spread of HWA. And are, kind of worth investing in. Like some of them in the further west and south of the province are a little bit too far gone for us to really treat. But as the pest moves eastward, we will likely, take on properties more eastward as well. We're also, I didn't mention this, but we're also like close to getting some more funding for that program, so we'll be able to probably expand it as well. There is no cutoff for old growth in our particular program. Like I'm pretty sure the old like hemlock old growth cutoff provincially is 130 or 120, something like that. But it's not something that we require. It doesn't have to be technically old growth. We're just looking for older, very mature stands. And more importantly, I would say it's like the percentage of hemlock dominated forest on that PID rather than the age of that stand, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Hi again.
Hey.
Just to tie into that more about the hemlocks. So you say 50 acres is generally, or the, for the hemlock conservation basically, but does that have to be, say, 50 acres of pure hemlock stand, or is that like, as long as there's old growth hemlocks on the stand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like this is kind of into like the nitty-gritty case by case
Yeah.
decision making that we're making.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be 50 acres of pure hemlock. Like one of our properties is 50 acres, and I think it's like maybe half hemlock, maybe 20, 25 acres.
Yeah.
But again, like the quality of that stand is very, very high, like quite old,
Yeah.
adjacent to a lake. There's other species at risk. Like there's other things kind of going on that increase the conservation value of that property.
Okay.
So it's like, there are many levels of analysis. It's not just if you have, X number of hemlock trees necessarily of
like
a
stems
certain
per
age.
hectare and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like, yeah, so often what will happen is that, we'll have someone who is interested send us a PID, and we have access to the provincial prioritization layer for hemlocks. So we can kind of put our PID through that to see how well it lights up, essentially, of like priority to conserve.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll kind of confirm that with a site visit with our field team to ensure that it's representative of our goals.
Okay, now the site visit,
Yeah.
would that I'll just put this plainly, would that be free?
Yep.
Oh, okay, okay, because
Like,
yeah, because
so long as that it, like our desktop analysis says it's worth going, sort of thing,
Okay.
right? Like, yeah,
Yep.
it's
Okay,
not going to be like anybody who might have hemlock on their land,
no,
we're just
fair
going to go
enough.
over it. But yeah, we'll
Yeah.
take a look and do that desktop analysis, and if we think it's worthwhile, we'll go and take a look for sure.
Okay, and just for curiosity's sake, because I'm nosy, like the desktop analysis, is that run through like the Department of Natural Resources, or like is there a forester in charge of that, or?
Yeah, we have a forester. So Shayla Nickerson is our forester on staff.
Okay.
She has access to all of the provincial data layers. So
Okay, cool.
she'll go through that and basically kind of spit out like how much is hemlock, or like which stands are of which percentage hemlock,
Yep.
sort of thing, and then also compare that to the provincial prioritization tool,
Mhm.
and then kind of determine whether it goes kind of in the bucket of we'll go visit or not.
Okay, very good. I guess just one further question, as long as I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. As far as like approved practices on like a working woodlands property, does maple syrup like does a sugar woods count as part of that?
Absolutely,
Okay,
100%. Yeah,
okay, okay.
highly encouraged.
Oh, okay, perfect. And now, further question to that, what about planting ginseng? Because I know that's more of a plant that's not really forestry, but is there any sort of provision in that that would be either allowed or disallowed?
I mean, I don't see why not.
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty light touch, right? Like it's not
Yeah, I,
active cultivation. I don't
yeah.
know a lot about ginseng, but
But the reason I was wondering is because it's also a very long process too. So it's like it's typically uh, in Nova Scotia, what is forecasted, I haven't done it personally, but what is forecasted for ginseng maturity is about 5, 6 plus years, depending on the grow season and you know the plot management, I guess. But no, I was wondering if there's like a time boundary where it's like, yes, you can, or sorry, just a limitation where yes, you can do maple syrup, but you can't do ginseng because it treads into like a conservation zone versus a working zone because it takes so long.
no,
But I
I would
guess
just I
mm.
think like sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
I think I would probably categorize that as like a working forest zone
Mhm.
activity. There are in the easement, which I'm happy to share, like provisions for what are called non-timber forest products, right? So
Yeah.
ginseng would be that.
Okay.
And yeah, as long as it's again like captured in the management plan and we're aware
Yeah.
of it, and there's
Okay.
like adequate evidence for it, I think we'd be fine with it.
Yeah. Okay. And so like the fact that ginseng isn't indigenous to Nova Scotia, would that have any sort of determining factor?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. And I guess the
I'm
same
happy to look
question
into
for
it. I've never had that question before. I'd be happy to
okay,
look into it.
well, okay, because see, that's actually where I'm, well, not mostly, but that's where a lot of my plan is coming from, is because I guess the same question goes for non-indigenous trees, like say like English oak or hazel. Uh, would that factor into like say if I had a stand, let's just say 30 acres of English oak, or English oak saplings that were 5 to 10 years of maturity, would that qualify as a work? Would that qualify under anything because it's a non-indigenous tree species?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, part of me feels like it depends
Yeah, no, fair
a
enough.
little
Yeah,
bit on like where it occurs on your woodlot and like what
yeah.
the surrounding ecology would
Mhm.
be. Um, but why don't I follow up with my team about that? Because I would like to have a more firm answer for you
Okay, no,
just on that. I'd be
yeah,
happy to check in on that for you.
okay,
So
yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
non-indigenous trees, but ginseng as well. I mean, these are very interesting questions. I
Yeah,
love it.
yes, yeah, because sorry, I'm not trying to like hog the platform here, but I just moved back to Nova Scotia, so I've never really done much forestry lately in Nova Scotia, so I'm kind of just trying to, feel out what what goes on here versus say New Brunswick or Western Canada.
Hmm. I mean, Robert, do you know much about ginseng or non-indigenous stuff
Not
in New
not
Brunswick?
ginseng. No, I'm literally just looking that up now. That's like
Okay.
sounds like a really cool idea.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
does seem like it's native to southern Maine, so I guess it's like a
Yeah.
near native.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it does grow within the the Wabanaki Acadian forest zone,
Yeah.
Mhm.
generally speaking, but it's more of a commercial opportunity than anything, I guess. But it's also like, I imagine you guys are probably familiar with the term silvopasture and alley cropping, permaculture, etc.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's kind of that's my approach to this instead of what I'm formerly used to, which was monoculture tree planting and things like that.
Yeah.
Like probably what you're more familiar with there, Robert, up in New Brunswick. I worked for J.D. Irving's Woodlands for a time, and well, it made me realize how not to do things.
I joined the call tonight to see what Nova Scotia is doing because I'm
Mhm.
on the board with the Nashwauk Watershed Association.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah,
like not JDI.
yeah.
But yeah, I think from what it sounds like, you might be talking a bit more about like working forest in this
Mhm.
zoning rather than the
Yeah,
conservation or even like the agricultural one. If
yeah.
I'm understanding it right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, like, to me, considering like the invasiveness of the species will be super important, and that's
Mhm.
something I can't really speak to per
Mhm.
se myself at the moment. But also like the level of management and density, right?
Yeah,
That you're
yeah,
considering.
yeah.
Um, and that I think those kind of factors might switch you in between those two zones from our
Mhm.
perspective, but we haven't
Yeah.
had that exact question. So I'm happy to kind of flush it out with my team and get a more of a firm answer, because it's very interesting. I come from an agricultural background and like permaculture and
Mhm.
organic farming and whatnot. So this is
Okay.
fascinating for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I know we're really kind of at the forefront of a shift. It's like people. I'll go ahead and say it, people our age with our mindset are kind of at a forefront here, especially in the maritime provinces, because we have such a long grow season and a lot of biodiversity compared to the rest of the country. But it's much like you said earlier, or was said earlier in the presentation, that woodlot owners mostly they want to clear cut, every 35 years and then call it good, with no regeneration and no real management plan and almost zero regard to conservation. So that's how things have been done here for a while, and it's good to see that it's changing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry for the tangent, but
No, no. Yeah, this has been a great discussion. Thank you, everybody. Go ahead.
Like one more question, just for anybody that has smaller woodlots that wouldn't meet the threshold for the full easement. Are there any partners that you're working with in across the province that might be able to service the smaller woodlot owners with like 100 acres or 50 acres?
Yeah, so I mean, I did mention, I think, we are like developing this cluster policy. So there is a chance for people to get involved with us if they have 100 or more, and they're, within haven't got this fully memorized, but I think like a 30 or 40-kilometer radius of what we're calling an anchor property of that 200-acre minimum. But otherwise, I don't think so. Like we're keeping a list of that, like of folks who kind of don't quite fit in our programs. But we're like the first working forest land trust in the province. There's not many other folks who will work with smaller land stewards. Um, yeah, and even so, like, some of the other land trusts in the province, while they're doing really wonderful work, aren't working with people who want to work on their land, right?
Yeah, it's full conservation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
that's our unique offering. And I hope that one day we will be able to grow into a way to serve smaller woodlot owners, because like I feel like just from the feedback and like learning over the past year, the the stewardship and conservation kind of ethic and value really does present at a higher rate with people who have smaller woodlots. Like in general, you know, because at that 200-acre threshold, a lot of folks need to make money off of it to pay for it, essentially, right? So it's just like this odd balance.
More difficult to be a little more intimate with such a large area too.
Yeah, absolutely. But that being said, I've learned so much from the folks who are already engaged. So yeah, I don't have a suggestion for another organization, unfortunately. Like it's too bad, but we're working on it.
Yeah, that's your niche though, like the working force. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Hey, Samantha.
Hi, Mari. I have two more questions for you that I just thought of.
Yeah.
The one came up when we were talking about the hemlock conservation program. So when you look at land that's coming in through that program, would you still be looking at either the 1, 2, or 3 kind of zones that you mentioned earlier being applied to those properties as well, or are those more for the carbon projects?
You're right. It's more for the carbon projects. I didn't do a very good job describing the zoning on the hemlock program. So let me just take a second. Any property that a property that goes into the hemlock program can have working forest zone, but any area that's hemlock dominated and receiving treatment is an automatic conservation zone. So no management can occur in those areas. Also has like potential to contribute to the protected area targets, but it's to ensure that we don't cut down the trees that we're investing in protecting, essentially. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. No, I figured that was the case with kind of the way that you explained how that program benefits the hemlocks, but I just wanted to confirm. And then the other question, I'm fascinated by the zones. All the questions I have are about the zoning. In the working forest zone, you mentioned that ecological forestry was permitted. Does the trust have a way of like defining or prescribing what ecological forestry looks like?
Yeah, so this is going to be like delineated what practices and what treatments, what kind of silviculture can happen like through the forest stewardship plan that's going to be prepared by our forester, or one of our partners such as the Western Woodlots Services Co-op or North Nova, like other organizations who have committed to promoting ecological forestry. Yeah, that's how we're kind of clarifying that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I don't see that, Sherm. It's all fuzzy.
I think your mic's working now too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Oh! I just wanted to say thank you for this brief tonight that confirms all our discussions that we've had up till now, and I thank you for that reconfirmation.
I'm delighted.
Sorry I couldn't get my chat or my audio to work earlier. I don't know what I did to get it to work now. Thank you, Robert, for telling me it works. Your slide comparing conservation easements to working woodland management easements, I think is vital to your concept and to getting people buying into Nova Scotia Working Woodland Trust. You're filling a hole that is missing in forest management by doing this. That slide is vital to selling your concept and vision.
Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, and thanks so much for coming tonight, Sherm. Yeah, really, it was delighted to see you to come in, and thanks for your questions. And yeah, just always happy to work with you.
Right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Alrighty, folks. So I'm gonna follow up with Sam regarding the non-timber forest projects. I'll just CC everybody if they're comfortable with that, just to kind of loop you in to what I find out. And yeah, again, just like feel free to reach out at any time if any questions come up, or if you know of anybody who might be eligible or interested in the trust. We always appreciate those connections. Yeah, just keep in touch. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I know it's a busy time of year, and yeah, just really happy to have you all here. Thank you so much.
All right, oh, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Bye.